Hello, I'm Stephen Pitalo from Corporate Communications, and today we are talking with Tonya Zepeda, our Director of Health, Safety, and Environment, also known as HSE. Thank you for being with us, Tonya.
Thanks, Stephen.
Let's start at the beginning, like we like to on here. Where did you grow up?
Texas, Houston, Texas, born and raised.
Really, in within the Houston proper?
So just outside the Houston area, a
Yeah.
little north, a little bit more in the country, I would say,
Okay.
outside the city.
And where'd you go to college?
So I actually just went to community college first, outside of high school. I didn't go pursue my degree actually till later in life.
Oh,
Further, I was actually almost in my 30s, and I went back to school and finished up on my degree online.
so what was it about HSE that attracted you enough to make it, your career?
Actually, it's interesting. I worked odds and end jobs. I worked in administration, things like that. And I had taken some classes, like I said, at the community college and was doing like drafting and design projects for typical oil and gas because it's Houston, of course. And on one of the projects, they had kind of raised the need for safety. At this time in the industry, 20 years ago, it was becoming bigger and bigger, the requirement for safety on all of our projects, and it was cascading out to even engineering companies. So, as part of the project, they had asked me to take on some safety elements in my responsibilities to ensure that everything we were designing had all of the safety requirements met, visiting the site. So, I found myself getting more interested in the safety side of it than in the drafting side of it, and I wasn't very far along in my career yet. And having all my family members work in, kind of blue collar jobs that were, inherently unsafe, and my husband coming home with welding cuts and scars and bruises and things like that, it kind of made me want to do something like that that would help prevent that. Bring him home safe, bring other people home safe. So at that point, I decided to go back to school and start working towards a degree in occupational health and safety so that not only could I have an impact at my job, but even, directly with the people in my life.
Now, when did you first start working for Sumitomo?
So I joined Sumitomo in 2016.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm going on just over 9 years now.
And what exactly does the director of HSE do? What is your, let's say, on a daily basis, when it's not an emergency, when there's not an emergency happening, what do you do on a daily basis?
So on a daily basis, because we're early on in our program, we're still developing a lot of our HSE management system. So starting to look at what kind of policies we need, what kind of procedures, and the biggest thing is assessing the risk. What risk are there to our employees? What risks are there to our group companies, to the operations we perform? And my role is to mitigate those risks, whether it's health, safety, or the environmental side. So on a day to day, I'm consistently looking at how we operate and then implementing standards on how to reduce the risk of those operations.
Okay. Uh, so I think it's safe to say that when the pandemic hit, um, that caused a lot of changes in business in general and operations, et cetera, um, offices, et cetera. Um, can you talk a little bit about what that meant to the HSE side of things?
Yeah, I learned more about pandemics than I ever wanted to know in those few years when things first hit. And I think even the subject matter experts I know in industrial hygiene, I don't know that any of us were quite prepared for the level of, the pandemic and how to efficiently and quickly implement protocols. So we were kind of, a lot of us, learning on the fly and building and developing things together on how to address it. The changes that it made in the workplace and the way we do business, I think, not only for me and Sumitomo, because I think for HSE, our nature is generally to be more proactive than reactive, whereas a lot of companies tend to be reactive. I think this shifted the narrative for the business to understand the need for the proactive side of things, of how we could start doing things up front to prepare for risk as opposed to waiting on the incident to occur and then correcting it, reacting to it. So it made a lot of changes in management's approach to implementing HSE, whereas they really more wanted to be on the forefront of it. it also it drove a lot more requirements, not only from our customers, but even from our employees, from our shareholders. Everyone had higher expectations of how we proceed moving forward. That are we really looking at, employee health? Are we making sure that we're prepared for these type of disruptions? And it's now not only spread from, pandemic management, but any type of disruption. So we see ourselves starting to really enhance our business continuity programs. And I think I'm seeing that as a trend across the industry. Everybody's looking at business continuity. What do I do if there's a major disruption? What if it's, a pandemic? What if it's a natural disaster? What if it's, just a employee turnover? How do we continue our business without these major disruptions? So I think that's some of the biggest changes it's made is in building the roads to that, which in some ways has actually made my job a lot easier. Because in the past, it would be very hard to sell to someone how to prepare for a risk that's never occurred.
Absolutely. I can understand until something presents itself, it seems like an impossibility.
Mm-hmm.
And why spend time on that? But now, from things like the pandemic, weather incidences that are unprecedented to this moment, not that floods, et cetera, don't happen, but probably not at this scale, uh, political unrest, just general safety, things like that. I, it must seem like you're really having to work within a time that a time in the country and on earth where could it be any more unstable? It feels like that. It
It
feels
does.
like that, and everybody's a little on edge. So I guess my question is, when you have the world as it is now, how do you balance keeping everyone safe and having programs that address safety and things like that without sort of giving people something to panic about in advance? You
Right.
see what I mean?
Yeah, and that's a big challenge. Finding the balance is always difficult because, there's a couple of risks if you over inundate people with information. One, you panic them, and then they don't even want to come to work at all because they're scared. Or two, you over inundate them so much that they become numb to it, and they think they become complacent because they're like, it's every day now. I'm not going to be worried about it because it's always happening. So finding that perfect middle ground can be, I think, one of the big challenges for HSE, the career overall, the profession. And some of the things that I do, is a little bit of a mix of, yes, we're going to monitor, the emergencies and the situations and make sure we notify employees when there's a relevant risk. But what we're also doing in the background is we're starting to build a culture of more awareness for our employees. So instead of just alerting you when an emergency is about to happen, we're starting to do more types of communications in general about, safety, about natural disasters, about events that may impact our employees. So doing things such as a safety moment in the beginning of a presentation, it's starting to make people more aware on a day to day. So what we're doing is we're developing a culture within the employees so they already have a mindset. So I don't have to email you every single day to tell you that there are security risks in the city that you live in. In any major city, there's security risk on a day-to-day basis. We all know that. Because our offices operate in major cities, we know that all of our employees are exposed to that. So it would be impractical for me to tell them every single day about the risk. But if I do it through an approach of where I start making it part of the engagement of our regular meetings, where we just have quick talks about general safety, and then when there are major events, then we get ahead of it and we start to provide them with the alert. So if we know a natural disaster is coming, we're going to make our employees aware and we're going to take it lightly. We may offer them a courtesy when we know early on, but we don't, put people into panic mode. And then as the situation escalates, just like with the authorities, we're going to update our alerts and let people know the risk is becoming higher. Here are the actions you can take. And we hope with that kind of combined approach to the day-to-day general program and the alert program that we're giving employees enough information to keep them informed, to keep them comfortable, and to not overly disrupt them either.
Okay. So it seems like communication is much more of a factor than it used to be, because communication used to be much more simple. Phone tree or something like that. People would be able to call each other if there was something going on. But now, obviously, cell phones, email, the internet, everything that there is that can connect us all together. It seems like that would help uh, safety issues. But what are some of the challenges when you do have all these other technologies that are available? I mean, I imagine picking which venue to do the communication in, that's the smartest, something like that. But what I don't want to answer it for you, but what are some of those challenges that you have in a communication area?
As you mentioned, the technology is helpful because now you have more methods that you can get in touch with people, which really does help out a lot because in some cases, when major events are going on, phone lines are jammed. So you can't get through on a phone line. However, if someone's Wi-Fi happens to be working, you might be able to get a text out to them or an email even out to them. So having those multiple options is helpful. What we've utilized is trying to hit on multiple methodologies to reach people. That way, if they don't get the phone call, they'll get the text message or they'll get an alert, via an app. So we utilize multiple tools. I think one of the challenges with that is managing the multiple tools and the multiple user lists and keeping those up to date, making sure the software is up to date, making sure everyone has access to it. That can be challenging, especially in a organization like ours where we even have group companies and we have suppliers and we have other people even sitting in our own offices that we need to reach out to in the event of an emergency. So we're trying to maintain this view of everyone and all of their collective contacts, and that can be a big challenge at times. The other challenge is making sure that people know what to expect to receive and how to respond to it, because we also do so much security training on telling people don't respond to numbers you don't recognize, don't press one, don't. However, sometimes we send out an alert, they get it from a generic phone number and they're like, do I respond to this, do I not? And we're waiting to get a safety confirmation. So that in itself can be a challenge. When you train people really well on one thing, it might actually have a negative effect on the other.
Right. So, in your career, has there been any situations or anything that happened that was just bizarre? Because I imagine in a safety situation, you see everything.
I'll just say, so at one point in my career, there was a pipe yard and a very large diameter pipe stored out in the yard. And we actually found that there were people living inside the pipe.
Okay,
And
Tonya, what do you do when you find people in the pipe?
yeah, so in those situations, that's not something you ever want you or your employees to directly interact, right? I mean, to even stumble upon that is kind of shocking. So there are areas where we have to bring in outside resources for support, because one, fortunately, the person did not suffer any type of injury as a result of being there. However, making sure that person was able to get to somewhere safe to stay, somewhere warm, because it was a cold environment. So they were, staying in an area basically that kept them warm. So that's something where we have to pull in external parties to come out, whether it's the police department, the local social services, to help support that kind of effort and get people the help they need. But yeah, we've seen some crazy things at times.
So in HSE, there's obviously some travel concerns that you have to address. Um, we have offices, all over the world. Uh, so what are the upfront concerns that you have to address as HSE director when it comes to our employees and travel?
And so, easily for the average, SC America's employee, travel is going to be our greatest risk. Because for the most part, our operations are in offices, which is a relatively low risk environment. But when we start traveling, that's when we come across all the different aspects of the public that are much more difficult for us to control as a company, right? I can, have a lot of control on the safety and the security of our office. But once you're outside these walls, right, I'm not following you around. We don't have you in a bubble. So some of the biggest challenges, though, is one, just knowing where everyone is going so we know what to monitor and look out for. So we've put some really great programs in place where we can identify where people are traveling to, and we can immediately start seeing the risk alerts for that location. That way, if our employee is going somewhere that we anticipate some risk, they could be notified what the risks are, how to mitigate them, what to avoid, what precautions to take, because that's one of the biggest things is knowing where they're going to go and what risks they're going to come out of it. The other thing that I think comes up is general complacency. Because our employees travel so often and sometimes to high risk locations often, you get very comfortable with that, right? Even just living in a city like New York, if you're a New Yorker, you're pretty comfortable with it, where a tourist might be more guarded. So we stop being as guarded and we start to get more lax in how we, approach that travel. So the other thing is helping to continue that mindset with the employees to keep that safety awareness on at all times. And that's a big challenge because you don't want, like you said, when that balancing act comes in, you don't want people to be paranoid and uncomfortable, but you want them to be alert and aware and prepared. So I think some of the challenges are just making sure we find that balance too.
So to sort of wrap things up, what does the future of HSE look like here for us at Sumitomo?
So I think more awareness in general and more collaboration. In the past, some of the approach has been everybody kind of operates independently, but HSE touches really everything we do. So every department, every function, it's applicable to it in some way. Now, without, piling it on like crazy, we want to start making it part of what we do and how we do it in an organic way. So HSC just needs to start being part of our general nature of the business when we do things, as opposed to feeling like this extra task that I have to do that's not really part of my job, right? It's like we have HSC. Why do I need to, check the risks before I go somewhere? So I think what we're trying to develop is a standard where we create that level of accountability within each of our employees to start utilizing, an HSE mindset as part of their everyday business. And I think before you know it, you will start to see things like improved morale, improved productivity, a reduction in incidents, a reduction in risk. So we see a lot of positive outcomes if we can build that culture within the organization under, a structured program where you have subject matter expertise to support you in doing that.
I guess one of the things I wanted to ask about is how do you get people into the mindset of really believing that the place where they work is a very safe place to work, considering the craziness of the world?
So, yeah, some days that can be difficult. People have, they're watching the news and they're seeing these different events go on every day and they might get multiple alerts, which does put some people in a panic mode, right? They don't feel as safe as they once did going to the office. They'd rather just be at home. So, some of the things, because we need that in office collaboration and we need to be able to work together, we start to try to really assure everybody that one, we make sure that all of our locations are safe, in secure areas. We make sure our buildings have all the protocols in place to protect our employees. We monitor that not only, before we move into a building, but consistently after to ensure that, safety and security are number one protocol of the building that we're in. We provide employees with a lot of guidance, training, and awareness on what to do if they, recognize a high risk situation, how to avoid those situations, and how to respond so they feel comfortable and prepared. And then the other thing that we've also done, we've taken an additional step, particularly since the pandemic, where leadership has given employees more autonomy to make sure that they look out for their own safety. So, in the past, you might have felt really undue pressure to immediately come into the office if everyone is in the office. However, maybe you have a severe weather event near your home. It's not impacting the others, but it's impacting you. But you feel this pressure in the past that I've got to go to the office. Everyone's in today. We've changed that message to let employees know that, not only looking at the situation of the office, but your situation. If you feel it is unsafe, if you are worried, if you have concerns, if there's some risk, then take that accountability and make the decision. Use your best judgment to advise that you may need to be remote that day. So giving them that personal accountability, they can monitor the risks in the situation. They can feel the comfort that the company is going to support them in doing what is safest for them. And I think that helps a little bit, so they know that, at least if I am concerned, I can relay that to my management. I can get the support I need, and I have options.
Thank you, Tonya, so much for talking to us about these issues and these things in your career. I know it's very challenging to be a part of the HSE experience, but we do appreciate it, and we appreciate you talking to us about it today.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate you having me on. I love getting the opportunity to share more information about it. I welcome questions, discussion, and look forward to continuing to work with you guys.
Great.